record-breaking poverty. So clearly, if we had lower taxes, if we spent less, if we were in less debt, we would have more prosperity. Now clearly, I acknowledge the fact that policies will never guarantee prosperity, even if they're good policies. I told you before that there is an element of the culture that must also be considered. But note this. Policy, I'm sorry. In terms of a lot of prosperity or very little prosperity, culturally, what is the factor? Values. If people don't appreciate the finest services and products, then there's going to be an economic meltdown. But the government can't do anything to solve that problem, because that would mean that the government would have to dictate values. And sadly, the United States of America does, to a degree, dictate values that it shouldn't be. A perfect example is the issue of gay marriage. Now, there's a fair number of people who think that this is an insignificant issue, and of course there are also a fair number of people who are very passionate about the legalization of gay marriage. But what is it in a nutshell? It's actually a religious issue. And I don't mean religious just in the terms of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Scientology, etc. I mean beliefs in general. If two homosexuals believe that their homosexuality is the proper way for them to express themselves sexually, and they believe that they are married, well, so be it. But when the government is telling them, you're not married, you're not going to enjoy the same tax benefits as a married couple or any other legal benefit as a married couple, you're not even going to be allowed to use that word legally. That's dictating values. Where do they go next in terms of dictating values? If they can always say, well, clearly, in terms of using precedent as their reasoning, use that term loosely there, say, well, we've got gay marriage, that's going to remain illegal. What do they go after next? What philosophical, religious, ideological, personal value do they go after next if they keep and maintain their prohibition of same-sex marriage, I ask you? And how does that help or harm the economy? Well, let me tell you this. No nation, none, that has ever attempted to dictate by law what values the society should hold has ever been strong. And I constantly return to the textbook example of Nazi Germany, but consider Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany dictated to the people that Judaism must be viewed as evil and disgusting and inhumane, and look at what happened. Germany wasn't prosperous because of that policy. It was a disaster, and it lost the war, thank God. Moving on very briefly, and I see that I've gone over the 15 minutes that I told you that I would strive to constantly limit myself to, but I have talked about the economy today and how important it is to me that we live in a prosperous country. Really briefly, I just want to reiterate the point and make as clear as possible the following point, that Obamacare is the greatest threat to our economy, and therefore the government has a responsibility to do away with that law. Now, federal government isn't managing to do that at this time, but the states can do it. The states can refuse to follow Obamacare by nullifying it. This is one reason why I believe it is so important that you help me get elected to the state legislature, because I will fight very hard for the nullification of Obamacare in the state of New Jersey, for the well-being of our economy, so that we can promote prosperity in this state at a time when we are suffering from severe economic problems. Now, why is Obamacare the biggest threat to our economy? There are two major reasons. First of all, it creates a severe and catastrophic conflict of the employers versus the government. Secondly, the burden of regulations. Now, briefly, what is the issue of the employers versus the government? Presently, the government is saying that employers must provide benefits for all full-time employees. So what are the employers doing? They're saying, oh yeah? Well, then we're just not going to hire full-time employees. That means less of the employees. I'm an employee today. Less of people like me and people like you employees out there, less of us can get full-time jobs because the employers are rebelling against the government. Okay, so what's the logical expectation here? Well, one is that the government will say, oh yeah, you're going to fight with us and say you're not going to hire full-time employees. We're going to make it a law that you must hire X amount of full-time employees. Government, then the employees will say, oh yeah, well then we're just going to stop giving people raises. And the government is going to say, we're going to force you to give people raises. We're going to create a law. And they're going to say, fine, we're going to start laying people off. And the government is going to say, no, you may not lay X amount of people off. And then you've got a point where we live in a fascist, purely fascist country where we have the facade of private businesses which are actually run by the government, and no fascist nation in the history of humanity has ever been prosperous, has ever done well, ever. And again, I point out the textbook example of fascist Nazi Germany. Look what happened to them. Now there's also the issue of the burden of regulations that Obamacare imposes on businesses, and which will affect individuals, employees as well, of businesses. It's the burden of regulations, 20,000 pages of regulations. 20,000! Which means if businesses don't want to get in trouble for breaking the law through a fine or even imprisonment, well, they're going to have to hire people to analyze all of those regulations. How much money is that going to cost to hire that research? How much? What an unnecessary tax at a time when there's already heavy taxes imposed on all of us that is causing extreme economic turmoil, especially in New Jersey, as I showed you as a textbook example of how taxes, debt, and spending is harming us severely. But we're going to throw all these 20,000 pages of regulations that keep businesses busy trying to spend their way into complying with all these regulations. All the while, there's the time factor. They're so worried about making sure that they follow all of these regulations that they can't possibly give ample time and concentration to improving the quality of their businesses. They can't spend as much time on being innovative. They can't spend as much time relating to their customers. They can't spend as much time relating to their employees. These are the two major reasons why Obamacare will be inevitably catastrophic to this economy, and why you must help me get elected to the state legislature, and you must help Don DeZarn get elected to the state legislature so we can fight against this. Before I conclude for the day, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to remind you that Don DeZarn and I are having a fundraiser this Saturday at Scooper's Gourmet Ice Cream in in East Windsor, New Jersey from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. We hope to see, we don't hope, we're excited to see you there because we know we're going to see so many of you there because the policies that we're proposing make perfect sense. And we know that you know that they make perfect sense. We know that you care about a better New Jersey. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I know that your time is extremely precious. There are many other things you could be doing right now. You could be watching television. You could be watching your favorite show. You could be talking on Facebook to your best friend. Instead, you're watching this. Thank you so much. I appreciate it tremendously. May God bless the state of New Jersey, ladies and gentlemen, and may God bless